So my name is Mike Bowie. This is Osteostrong. Welcome and thank you for coming. For you members, awesome, rock on. For the employees, thank you for coming. And for everybody else, welcome to Osteostrong O'Fallon. My wife and I were thrilled to bring this to O'Fallon, and when we did 2 years ago, no one really knew what biohacking was in this county. There were a few select people like this fella, and maybe one or two others. But biohacking is really what we're doing here, and I'm so excited to have Dr. Twyman here, who can really help explain on a deeper cellular level what's happening in your body, even more so than I probably ever could. So welcome, Dr. Twyman.
Thank you.
Let me turn this down. Sure.
All right, so greetings everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Hopefully this will be entertaining, and we'll definitely have time for Q&A, so ask away whatever you like, and I'll stay for as long as it takes. So I'm Dr. Michael Twyman. I'm a cardiologist, did all my training down at SLU, and was initially in the conventional world, and then kind of figured out I wanted to kind of treat the root causes of medicine. I was tired of people coming in, getting stented up every 6-12 months, and just putting Humpty Dumptys back together again. So went down the kind of functional medicine route for about 6-7 years, and that's what I've been doing out in practice. And then 3 years ago or so, I kind of came upon biohacking. This is a picture of me in Bhutan. My wife wanted to go to Bhutan because that's where the happy people are. And I said, sure, I'll go to Bhutan, but it's a 14-hour flight, and I don't really want to die from all the jet lag from going there. So did my research and found an article on Dave Asprey's website that he talked about wearing these funny glasses, these pretty much the exact ones I'm wearing right now. Wear them on the plane and your jet lag will be better. I had no idea about the science. I just said, find out, buy the glasses, wear them. I noticed a lot of difference, and I'll kind of go into it a little bit further in the speech. So today we'll kind of break it up a little bit as kind of what biohacking is. I'm a cardiologist, so I always want to know, what's your risk of dying of a heart attack? So let's figure that out first. And if you're not high risk, then go about and do whatever type of activities you want to do so you can live longer and feel better. And then once we kind of go through the test that I'd recommend to kind of screen what is your risk of a heart attack, then go through kind of the 4 lifestyle things that can optimize your heart condition. So this is me less than a year ago when I went to one of the other Osteostrong facilities. So I got involved with this because of the biohacking group. I run the biohacking group in town, and Anthony here is part of that. I've seen him at a few of them. And they asked me to come in there and kind of play around with the technology. And I knew about Osteostrong from Dave Asprey's work. So went there, did it at least once, and now kind of hardcore been reading and listening to a lot of podcasts of Dr. Jake, which is the gentleman who invented the technology. So if you're members here, you kind of already know what these machines do, but the key is that it helps strengthen your bones through osteogenic loading. So like if your bone's like a straw and you're compressing it end to end, that stressor on the bone makes it get stronger. So the more bone you have, the better your scaffolding is that you can put muscle on it. And it's your muscle that's your metabolic currency, and that's the main thing I focus on when we get into the resistance training. Is the more muscle mass you have, the longer you tend to live. I don't even know where that one came from. That's interesting. All right. So what is biohacking? This is Dave Asprey's definition. To change the environment outside of you and inside of you, so you have full control of your biology, to allow you to upgrade your body, mind, and life. Decent. I kind of look at it as more biohacking is just upgrading your life, giving you more energy, and doing it without necessarily pills and procedures. All right, so there's me in my other pair of glasses, looking like the Unabomber on the plane. I think I have a version of them similar in my bag, but there's different wavelengths of light. These red light glasses basically block all blue light, block all green light, tell your brain it's midnight. I wore them on the plane when it was late in Thailand, and my brain got the idea, okay, start allowing melatonin to get released and start getting tired on the plane. So once I got to Thailand, yes, I did have some jet lag, but it was probably less than a day's worth when it used to be 2 to 3 days. So we'll talk a little bit about mitochondria this evening. Mitochondria are the powerhouses in your cell. Every cell in your body has them, other than your red blood cells, and they're the things that make energy for your systems. They're your power plant. So the better your mitochondria work, the more energy you have to run the systems that you want them to run. And ideally, you want your brain, your heart, and your muscles to run well as long as you age. So there's a concept called epigenetics. It's your environment impacting how your genes turn on or off. So, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we really thought that there's a lot of genetic diseases built into people, and if you had that gene, you're for sure getting that disease. Now it seems to be more that maybe 85% of diseases really are coming from there's something wrong with the mitochondria making energy for those systems. So there's very few genetic diseases that if you inherit that gene, you're 100% going to get that disorder. Most of it is if you treat your mitochondria right, you turn the genes on that you need to, you don't allow the other ones to turn on. All right, so if you do these three things, the light, water, magnetism, you have life. So every planet on Earth that, I should say, any planet that would have life needs these three things. And this is probably the reason that there's not going to be life found on Mars, because they don't have a gravitational field, they don't have magnetism. And so these are the three things. Sunlight is the major programmer of all your cells, and this is what we'll dive deep into a little bit later. Light is primordial. It's the main thing that sets your circadian rhythm, your 24-hour cycle. You're supposed to be an outside being. You evolved under sunlight. Your body's programmed by sunlight. Barefoot in the grass, that's earthing or grounding. You're connected to the magnetic field of the earth. Water, yes, you can drink water, but honestly, your mitochondria make the water your body uses. So it's better to treat your mitochondria right, so they make the metabolic water for you. And then I always like to show a picture of Bono, because people think like, well, am I wearing these because you're Bono? Like, no, it's, these glasses block a certain wavelength of light that comes from the artificial lights in your technology. But I was wearing these about 3 years ago. Nobody knew what these things were when I was first wearing them at my practice or in the hospital. Now people started to have a little bit of idea what they are. 3 years ago I was a little more self-conscious wearing them in public. Now it's kind of like my trademark. I don't care what they look like. I sleep really well, and my goal is to live a long life. I had a grandmother make it to 106, and it's my goal that I will beat her. All right, so we'll go a little bit into the cardiovascular portion of this talk. These two gentlemen both suffered heart attacks. One didn't make it, one made it. Just looking at them, you would think the guy on the left was high risk of heart attack. He probably was in ways. It was Tim Russert. He was the NBC newscaster who had a heart attack at work and passed away. He had actually had a stress test 2 to 3 months before he had that heart attack. He had passed his stress test. So that's one of the myths. Stress tests are very poor predictors of who's going to have a heart attack. Stress tests are really good if you're having symptoms. You're having chest pain, shortness of breath, exercise intolerance. You put somebody on a treadmill and see can you recreate their symptoms. If you make a stress test abnormal, they have advanced vascular disease. They probably have a 70% blockage in one of their heart arteries. But if you pass the stress test, it actually tells you very little other than your exercise tolerance, which is a good marker of longevity, but you can easily pass the stress test and have a heart attack. Tim Russert had a test, which we'll talk about, that was high risk. The other gentleman, Bob Harper, was on The Biggest Loser. I've never actually seen an episode, but apparently he's a very fit guy and very motivating. But he basically dropped dead in a gym. Somebody did bystander CPR, resuscitated him. He made it to a cardiac catheterization lab, and my interventional colleagues stented open one of his arteries and saved him. Turns out he had an abnormal cholesterol particle called lipoprotein A, which is not something that's always routinely checked in a traditional blood panel, which we'll talk about. So he had a thing that put him at higher risk. So he might have looked like Adonis on the outside, but inside there's a lot of problems going on. So I frequently tell people there's 300 to 400 things that can actually cause heart disease. Everybody here has probably had their blood pressure checked, their cholesterol checked, their blood sugar checked, and you would know if you smoke or if you're overweight. Those are 5 important things, but they're not sufficient to say who has vascular disease and who doesn't. Typically, it starts with inflammation. Your immune system turns on. You want your immune system to come on when you have an infection or you sprain your ankle, and you need your immune system to help repair that. But if your inflammation is up all the time, your arteries are getting scratched. It's like a fire in the arteries. If you don't shut that fire off, there's more risk that the plaque will develop. And it's kind of a progression. There's studies in 18-year-old kids in the Korean War who had autopsies after trauma. They were already developing atherosclerotic plaques in their aorta, so they were already starting to have the earliest signs that plaque was developing. So most atherosclerosis is a long process. It's only a problem when one of these plaques ruptures. You got 60,000 miles of blood vessels. They're like little pimples on the walls of the artery. That little pimple ruptures, a blood clot forms. That blood clot blocks the blood downstream. Now the tissue downstream doesn't get oxygen, doesn't get its nutrients. It starts dying. That's what actually the heart attack is, or a stroke. It's not so simple that your arteries are like a sewer pipe and they're just filling full of sludge, and when they get 100% full of sludge, now it's a heart attack. It's more that something acutely happens. this is a picture of what the coronary arteries look like. There's 3 of them. They sit on the outside of the heart. Top, kind of looking down the barrel of the artery. The lumen is where the blood flows. The artery walls, actually what you want to know is how healthy is the artery wall. By the time the plaque starts forming, most of the time the plaque actually positively remodels. It grows outward first, that the artery sort of gets bigger on the outside, but the tube where the blood flows still stays the same size. It's a late finding where it starts encroaching in where the blood flows. And typically, until the plaque forms 70% of a blockage, you won't necessarily have symptoms. All right. So let's see. So this is the test that comes up close. There we go. This is the test that I always use as a baseline to tell people what their true risk of a heart attack is. It's called the CT coronary calcium scan or calcium score. There's a few different x-ray facilities in town that do this for about $100 or so. Non-invasive test, minimal prep, you don't need to be fasting, there's no IV, there's no contrast. The amount of radiation is about the same as a mammogram. But this test looks for calcium in those 3 arteries that sit on the outside of your heart. Calcium is supposed to only be in your bones and teeth. If it's in your arteries, it's a marker that damage has occurred and your body's trying to repair that damage. So more calcium in the arteries, more plaque, more risk of a heart attack or stroke. This test is so important that presidents now are required to get this test. So President Clinton, he passed every one of his executive physicals. Every year they had him do a stress test at Bethesda or Walter Reed. Passed the stress test within a couple years of leaving office. He ends up having, looks like a small heart attack, but had multivessel coronary artery disease, needed bypass surgery. How did they miss it? Because stress tests miss disease until it gets severe. If he would have had a calcium score, they would have seen that years ahead of time. Now every president has to get one every year. Astronauts too. So NASA did some of the original research on this, but they make all their astronauts get it. If their calcium score is greater than 0, they ground them. There's some people that they have grandfathered in, but all new recruits essentially, if their calcium score is greater than 0, you're grounded because something happens in space. There's not much they're going to be able to do for you. So who should get it? This is kind of the guidelines of the SHAPE Society. I kind of use a guideline of, if you're over 40 and you have some risk factors, give it a consideration, but typically women get heart disease about 10 years later than men, so that's when you would start for them. But I typically will ask a pretty detailed family history, and if you have a family member who has heart disease that, I saw a guy yesterday, his dad had a fatal heart attack at 41, his patient's 32, I said, you're gonna go get a calcium score. I'm still suspecting it to be 0, but with a family history like that, I'm gonna go check. So what are the odds your tests can be 0 versus being abnormal? Well, 6 out of 10 people who do this study are gonna have an abnormal scan. If your score is 0, your risk is 0.4% of having a heart attack over 5 years, very low risk. The higher the score, the higher the risk. In my career of doing this, I probably have 10, 20 patients that have had scores over 1,000. Almost all of them end up getting heart catheterizations to see how bad the disease really is. A couple times those patients have ended up needing bypass surgery because we could do all the lifestyle supplements and medications. We weren't going to reverse their severe left main coronary disease, which put them at very high risk of sudden cardiac death. So the other test I've recently added to my practice is called the Carotid Intimal Medial Thickness Scan, or CIMT. So you want to know how the arteries are actually functioning by how thick they are. So your carotids are the arteries that pump blood to your brain. They're supposed to be a certain thickness as you age. This study is, again, a non-radiation source test. It takes about 5 minutes or so to do. And they measure how thick that artery is. And they'll basically be able to give you a vascular age. So screen left, that's normal. It's less than 0.5 millimeter thick. On the right side says abnormal. It's thickened. So some of the benefits of the CIMT is that you get this test as a baseline, do some type of intervention from a lifestyle, supplement, medication standpoint, and then 6 months, 12 months down the road, you repeat this study, and if things are going according to plan, we'll see that plaque stabilize and ideally start to regress. The calcium score test is a little bit more gray zone. It's not that common that the calcium score test starts decreasing once it's abnormal. The goal for the most part is to freeze it where it's at and not let it get worse. There are some cases where I've seen it go down, but there's also some data that using statins, and we may talk about statins later, but statins are just one tool, but statins may cause the calcium to go up. It's debatable, is that a higher risk finding or not? You know, one theory is that it's just turning that cell vulnerable plaque, the stuff that's more likely to rupture and cause a heart attack, into more calcified plaque that's not going to do anything, so maybe it's less dangerous, but nobody knows exactly for sure. So that's why I don't recommend repeating the calcium score every year once it's abnormal. If you're high risk, and we need to do things about it. Then the third test we'll talk about that I recently acquired, and as far as I know, the only person in St. Louis that has it, is a test that measures your endothelial function. And the endothelium is the inner lining of your blood vessels. It's one cell thick, and if you took all your endothelium out of your body and laid it flat, it'd be the surface area of 6 tennis courts. It's basically the air traffic controller between what goes in the lumen where the blood's flowing and what can get up into the wall or the artery. So you can think of it as like a tennis net. Sometimes use this picture or analogy too when we talk about certain lipid particles. You can have really, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but cholesterol is a little bit more complicated than good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, because there's really no such thing as good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. But we usually tell people like the endothelium, if it's damaged, there's a hole in the net. There's just more risk that stuff's going to go between that hole and get trapped in that wall of the artery. This is the test that I have available in my office now called an Endo Pat. It's non-invasive. It's basically like 2 little finger blood pressure cuffs that measure the flow or the tone of the blood in your fingers. The test takes 15 minutes. You do 5 minutes baseline with both fingers. Looks like a little seismograph. Then you blow up a blood pressure cuff on one arm, cut off the blood flow to that arm, so it flatlines in that one arm. The other arm's a control. After 5 minutes, you open up the stopcock, blood rushes back down into that arm. You've had that pins and needle sensation if you fall asleep on your arm. That's what you may have. But as that blood rushes back down in there, the small blood vessels see this huge slug of blood coming in there. If they're healthy, they release nitric oxide and they'll dilate up those arteries to receive that large flow. They should double in size, and you can measure that with this test. If it doesn't go more than 1.67, you have abnormal endothelial function. And there's things you can do from a lifestyle, supplement, and medication that improves your endothelium. Because it's your endothelium that is really the first marker of damage to your vascular system. You can have endothelial dysfunction 7 years before plaque will be seen on a CIMT or calcium scan. So if I catch somebody at 30 years old, 40 years old that has abnormal endothelium, I can work with them with their lifestyle, supplements, and meds. They end up not ever getting an abnormal calcium scan or abnormal CIMT. Labs, this is the biochemistry. So this is a snapshot in time, what's going on in your system. And it is really much more complicated than good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, because cholesterol is just a substance that your body uses, and Mother Nature, whatever, did not put cholesterol into your body to give you heart attacks. You use cholesterol to make your hormones, to make the outer shells of your cells. It's a repair substance. But if the cholesterol itself gets damaged because of your poor lifestyle or something else going on, that damaged cholesterol is then the stuff that gets trapped in the artery, starts building up the plaque. A few of the tests I typically do that are outside the standard medicine is really looking at lipid particles. Particles are what predict risk. So think of cholesterol as a passenger, particles are the cars. The cars drive the passengers around the system, drop them off, the cells do what they need, they get back in the car, goes back to the liver, gets recycled. So you can measure the particles, you can measure how big the particles are, it matters. The bigger the particles, less likely it is to cause problems. Bob Harper had the LP(a) or lipoprotein A. 20% of the population has it. If your mom has it or your dad has it, that puts you at increased risk of inheriting. It's autosomal dominant, so you've got a 50-50 shot if your parents have it. And it's like LDL, but it's more atherogenic and thrombogenic, meaning it's more likely to cause blood clots. And there's not really great treatments per se for elevated lipoprotein A. We just know it's a risk factor for vascular disease. So you mostly want to lower their inflammation if they have a lot of inflammation, and then if you monitor their LDL particle number, which you should, you want their LDL particle number to be under 1,000. Blood sugar, obviously very important. You need to know if you're insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, or diabetic. But just a regular A1C isn't always sufficient. So you want to know their fasting glucose, but you also want to know they're fasting insulin. I didn't put that up there, but sometimes people have a normal A1C, a 90-day average blood sugar, and their glucose might be slightly high, but their insulin's like 50. Normal should be like ideally under 10, but really like 5 or less. But insulin, when it's really high, just shows that your pancreas is pumping out so much of this hormone, trying to keep your blood sugar in check. And while you look at the other markers, it looks like it's doing a good job. If you don't correct something in a couple of years, you're going to burn your pancreas out, and all of a sudden your blood sugars are really start shooting up, and you're going to start doing a lot more damage. So you can find insulin resistance at a lot of earlier stage with fasting insulin levels. Vitamin D is a very important hormone for your immune regulation, very important for cardiovascular health, blood pressure. The omega-3s, which we'll talk about, that's basically the DHA and EPA in seafood. The omega-3s are very anti-inflammatory. They do lower triglycerides. And if you have plaque in your arteries, it tends to put a thicker cap over the artery plaque, kind of seal that stuff into the wall, less likely that plaque ruptures. And then genetics, there are sometimes I will check some genetic markers that put people at increased risk of vascular disease, but I sometimes get away from this because I want to know what's actually going on with your arteries, because you're not a collection of your genes, it's what's going on in your environment to turn those genes on. So you can inherit the worst genetics from your dad, but if you live a totally different life, maybe your arteries are healthy. So do a carotid scan, do a calcium score, and if those are normal, it matters that he has those genes. He still needs to lead a good life, good lifestyle, I should say, but you don't necessarily need to know what his genetics were. So unless somebody had a family member die really early, or they're just very, very curious about, why do I have vascular disease, I don't always routinely check a lot of genetic markers. And then now I'll kind of transition a little bit into more of the biohacking and kind of my four-legged stool of optimal health. So four-legged stool is kind of the idea that, if one of the legs is broken, you're not going to have optimal health. And I'll start with the most important leg first, is sleep, but we'll talk about exercise, nutrition, and stress as well. So sleep, this is critical. So sleep might not always be the sexiest topic, but if you want to live a long time, you need to work on sleeping optimally. And fortunately, I've been a good sleeper for a long time, and now that I know what to do from the biohacking, I can quantify it and actually know what improves my sleep. So I'm wearing an Oura ring. This is probably the best sleep tracker there is right now. The ring tells you, all the usual stuff that a fitness tracker would, how many steps and such, but it will also tell you how fast it takes you to fall asleep, how much REM sleep, how much deep sleep, and then if you have any awakenings in the night that you're not aware of, so how restful your sleep is. But it gives you also very interesting data, how much your temperature is dropping at night, what your average heart rate is while you sleep, which is a good marker for cardiac conditioning, and there's something called heart rate variability, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But sleep, this is when the body repairs itself. So, you can exercise like crazy, you can eat a perfect clean diet, but if you don't sleep well, you're not going to consolidate those good things that you're putting into the system. And it's the mitochondria that are repairing themselves at night, and they need darkness to do that. So melatonin, people see it as a supplement. Your body makes melatonin by the way it's interacting with the environment, how light enters your eye. You start making melatonin throughout the day, it sort of gets collected in one part of the brain, and then you need 3 to 4 hours of darkness before that hormone is released from the brain. If you're under artificial light in front of your things with screens up until 10 o'clock at night and you're trying to lay your head down at 10:05, you might be able to fall asleep, but you're basically going to be low on melatonin. It's going to take a while for that melatonin to get released. And this is not an uncommon story, is that somebody falls asleep at 10 o'clock and they're wide awake at 2 a.m. They can't go back to sleep for a while. It's a little bit oversimplistic, but it's sort of that their body ran out of melatonin to keep them under. Melatonin doesn't really make you sleep. It gets you into those deeper levels of sleep, but melatonin is also something that's very anti-inflammatory. It prevents things from rusting. It's the fuel that makes the mitochondria that are damaged repair themselves, or basically commit suicide and get out of there. So melatonin is extremely important, and it's best to do it the way nature intended. Make it by getting out in the sun throughout the day and minimizing the artificial light at night. If you snore, doesn't always mean you have apnea, but if you stop breathing in the middle of the night, you wake up with headaches and you feel groggy, you feel like I could still sleep another 4 or 5 hours, good chance you probably have sleep apnea. And in the traditional cardiovascular world, it's becoming more well known that sleep apnea causes increased vascular disease, causes atrial fibrillation, abnormal heart rhythm. So even when I was doing more conventional cardiology, I was routinely screening for sleep apnea. But sleep is more important than just sleep apnea. But if you have apnea, you get to treat it, you put less stress on the heart, less inflammation, less likely to do damage to things. And there's now home sleep studies you can do. You don't always have to go to a full-on lab. There's different versions that looks like a little watch. You wear the finger probe. Same company that makes my Endo Pat makes that. You sleep in your own bed. It's fairly sensitive to picking up obstructive sleep apnea. If you have central apnea where something's wrong with the brain, or it's something going on, narcolepsy or restless legs or some other kind of sleep disorder, that's not what it's meant for. But if you snore, stop breathing, it'll pick that stuff up. I routinely talk about sleep caves. So you want your bedroom to be a place of regeneration. So your bed basically should be for two places: sleep and sex. Nothing else in the bed, because you want your mind conditioned that when you go to bed, you're repairing itself. So if you go to bed and you're reading or you're watching TV, you're not necessarily conditioning yourself to go to sleep. So the darker it is, the better. How dark? Ideally, you should not be able to see your hand in front of your face. So if your room is very bright because of outside lights, invest in a pair of blackout curtains. It might be the best investment you can do for your sleep. If you need a nightlight because you have to get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, it's best to use like an amber bulb or a red light bulb. There's different companies that make them. They're not that expensive, but you don't want to have bright light in your bedroom at night, because that bright light will destroy your melatonin and you're not going to sleep as well. The other thing is you want it to be cool. The cooler it is, the deeper levels of sleep you can usually obtain. This is one of the reasons why you probably should not work out really late into the evening time, because you raise your core body temperature, and that is a signal that you need to stay awake. When it cools off, your body makes different hormones. It says time to rest and repair. So if you're really hardcore, then you invest in something called the Chili Pad. The Chili Pad is a mattress topper, runs silicone tubes over the top of it, and runs distilled water. So you can dial your temperature of your bed down to 55 degrees or up to like 110 degrees. So if your bed partner doesn't want the room to be 68, well, you can make your side as cold as you want. Quiet goes without saying. Your body needs quiet to repair itself. But I personally have a fan running just to have some white noise. White noise isn't a problem, but you definitely want to get away from having a TV running. I don't know the exact details, but maybe you're actually only 5%, 10% conscious, and maybe 85, 90% subconscious. And what you're listening to at night is imprinting in your body. So if you're listening to the news and listening to shootings and war and crime, you're doing some negative stuff to your subconscious. So don't listen to TV or anything when you're sleeping. You have white noise, that's fine. And then minimize technology. Your bedroom, if you could get away with it, would have a bed, and that'd be it. There'd be nothing else in your bedroom. These things are great during the day, but you do not want one of these things sitting by your head. They have all sorts of radio antennas and Wi-Fi, and your mitochondria are basically, they're their own satellite dishes. They're listening to their environment. These things are like radar jammers of mitochondria sometimes, especially if you put this thing right by your head on a nightstand when you sleep. So I know lots of people use these things for their alarm clocks. I do too, but what I've ended up doing is I take my phone and I turn off everything I can, turn off Bluetooth, turn off everything, and then I put the thing as far as I can across the room. One, forces me that when the alarm goes off, you get up and go turn it off. There's many reasons why you probably should not be hitting snooze. It's basically a fight or flight stimulus every time the alarm goes off. So you hit snooze, go sleep for 10 more minutes, you get startled again. You're just raising cortisol, and you're probably starting your day off not the greatest. So if you feel like you got to keep hitting snooze because you didn't get enough sleep, just try to go to bed earlier that night, but work on your circadian rhythms. You get the circadian rhythms right, you're not going to have to feel that need that you got to keep hitting snooze, snooze, snooze. Blue light, this is ubiquitous in our modern day environment. So everybody's probably had some chemistry or biology book or physics book, and they've seen the kind of the wavelengths of light. If you've seen a rainbow and it's got the 7 colors, well, there's other lights that you can't see. So there's infrared, but you can feel that as heat. There's X-rays. You break your bone, the X-ray goes through. So your body, you can't visually see it, but your mitochondria still sense those things. Blue light in the morning time is what raises cortisol. It gets you ready to go for the day. But that's blue light from the sun. So to optimize your circadian rhythm, you would see the sunrise, or shortly after sunrise, every single day for 5, 10, 20 minutes. It's basically like a GPS clock resetting your system. And so, I've rarely missed them this year. I've seen every single sunrise, and I'll show you later. There's one crazy day that I went out to go see the sunrise, but the sunrise has blue light, red light, green light. It's all balanced. It's the way Mother Nature made it. That blue light wakes you up, you start making your testosterone, all the hormones that you need to function that day start getting turned on. Midday sun, start turning that stuff off when UV radiation comes out. So your hormones are very much yoked to the light environment you're exposed to. Blue light from your technology is 4 to 5 times more powerful, or at least intense, I should say, as sunlight. So if you're under artificial light at night and you're in front of a screen that isn't protected, you're basically telling your brain it's noontime in July all the time. Stay awake, stay alert, keep cortisol up. So this is one reason if you have kids or grandkids and they say they have a horrible time sleeping and they're playing with their iPhone all night, that has a big role in it. If you don't think the technology companies understand this, you'd be wrong, because that's the reason why night shift modes are in the iPhone and the Droids have their own version of it. So if they didn't know that blue light didn't cause health effects, they wouldn't put the technology in there to turn the feature off. But until they really redo all the technology, you got to take it upon yourself to protect yourself. So like I said, you get a pair of glasses. They're all different price points. I can talk to you about that offline, but invest in a good pair of glasses because it's mostly the light that enters your eyes that sets these rhythms off. And then you don't have to put the red light on, Roxanne, but at my house you actually do, because at nighttime I don't have any of these white, blue LED lights on anymore. I have different red light bulbs at home. My house looks like a submarine or a house of ill repute, but I don't really care because I want to protect my cortisol levels and I want my melatonin to stay nice and high because melatonin and cortisol are yoked. So if you have really high cortisol, you're going to have low melatonin. You have high melatonin, cortisol is going to be where it's supposed to be. So exercise. So exercise is very important, but I'll probably give you some ideas that you haven't really thought about with exercise. So we'll talk a little bit about what's optimal for exercise and then how do you actually recover from exercise, because exercise is a stressor to the body. You stress it, you let it relax. And that's sleep. Sleep is when you repair yourself. So if you go to the gym and do a huge heavy workout, if you don't sleep well, that's a stress. Stress of working out, it's going to cause a lot of inflammation in your system. And you're not going to get the same benefits as if you slept well. So Michael Phelps, he was obviously a world-class athlete for many years. He prioritized sleep. He had extremely rigid sleep cycles because he basically outslept his competition. Yes, he was a fabulous swimmer and he worked extremely hard, but he recovered better than anybody else. And this is a little bit plug for the X3 bar. So this is Dr. Jaquish, the gentleman who invented the Osteostrong equipment. As part of the research he was doing for that, he ended up finding out about different abilities of muscle and through different ranges of motion, how much your resistance you can actually put on it. And he realized that actual traditional weights wasn't as efficient because at your chest you can only push 100, but out here you could have 300. You're limited to the 100 pounds because you can't get the 300 pounds off your chest. So he developed this X3 system, which Osteostrong systems, some of them have this kit. I actually ordered this kit last week. It showed up on Monday, so I've done 3 of these workouts so far. It's pretty interesting. So this foot plate where the bands can go under, because if you pull the rubber band, it's not a rubber band, it's actually a latex band about the size of your pinky in thickness. You would probably break your foot if you were pulling it up directly. So this metal plate has a little channel in it where the band will go into. And then there's different ways you fold the bands. And you can do a chest press, that's a tricep push down, it's an overhead press, and then a front squat. So that's workout 1, then day 2 you do a different one. So Dr. Jaquish, if you ever see other pictures of him, he's absolutely like linebacker in size. And apparently this is the only exercise he did for 2 years, was the X3. And he put on 45 pounds of muscle. So I'm gonna try to see if I can recreate that or not. So I'm on day 3, we'll see in a year or so. All right, so 2 #1 athletes, both top of the game for many years, but Woods broke down a lot more than Federer did. And part of it was Federer was a better recoverer as well. He would take days off. He knew when he wasn't supposed to push himself. Woods was just go, 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 go. And obviously Woods has some other issues outside of his sport, but he didn't sleep well because there's definitely stories of him getting up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, go running 5K and lifting weights in the morning and doing all sorts of crazy stuff that was totally against your circadian biology. So Woods ended up having major back issues. He's had multiple spine surgeries. Yes, does golf contribute to back problems? Probably, but it was his lifestyle that really ended up leading to that. And then talk about heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is a measurement of the beat-to-beat difference of your heartbeats. So each one of those little upbeats is a heartbeat, essentially from the bottom chamber. Your heart rate variability should be high, and we'll talk about it in the next slide. But your heart shouldn't be 70, 70, 70, 70, 70 beats. It should be expanding. So as you breathe in, the heart rate goes up. As you breathe out, it goes in. The further it expands, the healthier your heart conditioning actually is. It's also a good measurement of heart rate recovery, because if your heart rate variability is very low, your body's still under a lot of stress. So many athletes will use this. You can check it with different equipment. There's chest straps, there's a couple different wrist monitors and finger probes that can do this measurement. And if you have poor heart rate variability, that's probably a day you don't want to really push it that hard. You probably need to kind of take it a little bit easier and let the body recover. If you have good heart rate variability that day, it's a day you should push it harder. And then I have the light here. I got my own personal version. I'm not so hardcore as Jack Cruz where he has his on the whole time, but maybe I'll do that. But this is the Juve Go. I know he's got another Juve panel over there. So Juve is just one of the manufacturers of these photobiomodulation devices or low-level light therapy devices. There's like 5,000 studies about the power of red light doing different healing aspects. So red light, basically I tell people it recharges your batteries. So blue light is very stimulating, waking you up. Red light's the antidote to it. So decreases inflammation, decreases pain. If your muscles are really sore after exercising, it's going to help lower that inflammation, especially that delayed onset muscle stiffness and pain that's usually like 2 days later, helps decrease that. And then for people who really are caring about their skin quality, it actually helps with collagen. So it just makes the collagen tighter, less wrinkles. But I think I have the next slide. Let's see if we do. Nope, we're going to do it a little bit later. But this red light therapy also, when I say recharge your batteries, we'll talk about food, but light is food. And this is something that can help recharge your internal battery. So I have one of these things at home. I use it routinely, but this thing will never replace the sun. You need to be out in the sun routinely. How much? Good question. Depends on your skin, lightness or darkness, and how much sun exposure you've had previously. So if you're somebody who stayed inside for a year and you went to Mexico at noon, you're going to have a problem if you're out there all day long. So it's kind of, the sun is a dose response. So you kind of build yourself into it. But there is something interesting, and I can tell you from personal experience it actually works, is you can do something called hybrid tanning, where you have red light in the morning. So I did this naturally. I did this 2 weeks ago. I was down in Cancun. Went and saw the sunrise on the beach, no shoes, took the shirt off, watched the sun pop up out of the ocean. There's no UV radiation in the morning time, so you're not going to get burned. But that red light from the sun is preconditioning your cells to get ready for UV light coming later in the day. So then midday, I stayed out all day, but I sat out actually in the sun for whatever 20, 30, 40 minutes. Skin starts getting pink, hide in the shade for the rest of the day. And evening time, sun's setting, the UV radiation's gone away again. Sunset is all red because of the way it's coming through the atmosphere. And that red light again starts repairing any damage from the UV, but it also charges this water battery in your cells. So sunrise and CT. CT stands for cold thermogenesis or cold therapy. So I said I saw every sunrise this year. I actually missed a couple because I was up in Plains. I kind of looked out the window and saw the sun coming up. But this was, what day was this exactly? I don't remember exactly what day it was. It was like January or something. And it was -3 outside. And that was me watching the sun pop up over the atmosphere. And I was like, okay, after about 5 minutes, it's time to go inside. So, but it doesn't matter how cold it is outside. It doesn't matter, if it's cloudy, you still need that light to program your cells with your GPS clock for the day. And then these are some of the people who kind of make cold thermogenesis famous. guy up on the top left, probably the most famous one for it is that's Wim Hof, the Iceman. He's done some crazy feats of strength. He's not a conditioned athlete, but he does this cold therapy routinely and teaches people how to do it. But he's run marathons, not trained, at the Arctic Circle. He swims under the polar ice. He does some amazing things where he's packed in ice and they inject him with basically inject him like endotoxins and staph, and he doesn't get an infection because somehow he upregulates his immune system to kill the infection. Some crazy stuff. But already talked about Phelps a little bit, but Phelps also apparently routinely trained in like water that was 55 degrees. That's the same temperature as the Pacific Ocean, but if you train in cold water, your mitochondria engines are so much more efficient. He just was able to pump out more energy quicker than his competitors. And then Asprey, that's him standing in a cryo chamber. That's more for effect, with the liquid nitrogen smoke coming out. Does cryotherapy work? Yes, no. I mean, I've done it. It's kind of an interesting thing. If you've never done it, I usually recommend it. It's a good biohacking experience. It takes 3 minutes, and you're pretty cold for a while, and then you come out and skin's all pink, and then you feel warm and tingly and feel good for an hour or two. But how much health benefits? It's probably a little bit debatable. I mean, I think they oversell it that you're burning 5,000 calories for 2 days, and your liver functions improved. All this stuff is like, no, it probably just makes you feel good for a couple hours. If you really want to have effect, you need to do water therapy, and the reason they know that is that it's actually in the plastic surgery literature. If you've ever seen the ads for Cool Sculpting are these steel pads that the plastic surgeons use to basically do liposuction without needles. They put these cool pads wherever you don't want fat, and they turn these things on. But metal conducts cold much better than water, much better than air. So you should never use these metal pads on your own. I don't think Cruz has tried it, but I don't think most people would ever try metal pads themselves. But water, no. Are you going to go jump in a frozen lake the first day? Absolutely not. It's your body's not conditioned to that. But everybody has something called the mammalian dive reflex. All mammals have this. Basically, your face and upper chest has this thing that when it gets cold, a certain reaction happens in your body, a certain nervous response. So initially, try with just a cold shower. Take your regular shower and just turn as cool as you can tolerate. And just have it hit your face for as long as you can tolerate. Go back to warm, and then eventually, when you get more adapted to it, then you can work your way up. I mean, I'm doing some program right now called 75 Hard. It's a mental challenge mostly, but one of the things it requires is a 5-minute cold shower. How cold? As cold as you can tolerate it. Right now I can tolerate all the way to cold, but I couldn't do that on day one, no way. But cold has a lot of health benefits. It's very anti-inflammatory. It's probably one of the major things that it does. I frequently, my assistant, she and I have different regulatory cycles on how hot our office should be. I could be wearing a t-shirt all year, I think, and she's freezing. And the second she turns the heat on, I can last for about 5 minutes before I have to turn the heat off. So cold will ultimately make you exothermic. If you can do cold adaptation, there's a doctor that many of us follow here called Dr. Jack Cruz. He wrote a very interesting book how he basically used cold and a couple other things, timing of his meals, to lose well over 100 pounds in a year without diet. Well, there was a diet involved, but he wasn't like calorie restricted. He did 0 exercise for that year and did not require bariatric surgery to lose the 100 pounds. He was doing cold thermogenesis. All right. Nutrition. Nutrition is important, but it's not the be-all, end-all of health and well-being. I like to tell people sometimes focus on the engines, focus on the mitochondria. If you have a beat-up engine, it does not matter if you put premium fuel into it, it's not going to run any better. You have to work on fixing the engine. How do you fix the engine? Light, water, magnetism. Get the mitochondria to work better, then they can work with almost any fuel source. Another story about Phelps and another athlete is Usain Bolt. There's stories that Usain Bolt was eating chicken nuggets, the week he was running, world record 100-meter dashes. Food was not the main thing that was running that guy. His mitochondria were like, a Ferrari engine. He could have put any fuel in it for the most part, and he was going to do what he did. So food is important. You should not eat complete junk. I'm not saying to eat complete junk, but don't focus solely on food. You got to focus on the light environments, your sleep, all these other things. All right. So photosynthesis. I won't go through the whole slide, but basically sun makes plants, you eat the plants, you break it back down into light in your system. That's about the easiest way to think of it. So sunlight hits the chlorophylls in the plants. They use the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out and that's in the atmosphere and water. They turn it into carbohydrates and oxygen. You breathe in the oxygen, you eat the carbohydrates, the mitochondria put that back together and turn it into water and carbon dioxide, and the cycle starts again. So almost all foodstuffs on this earth are grown by the sunlight. So you're either directly eating the plant, which is stored up sunlight, or you're eating an animal that ate the plant. And I'll talk about, sure, we got time, is that the mitochondria, they're not eating carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. They're basically eating electrons. The faster that those electrons move through that system, the faster they spin this thing that makes energy. It makes ATP, which is one of the energy currencies that your systems run on. But there's an interesting book. This is earlier this year in Puerto Rico. It doesn't show up so well here, but there's a double rainbow, so it looked interesting. But an interesting book was by Dr. Gerald Pollack called The Fourth Phase of Water. Fascinating stuff about how water actually works when it's exposed to certain light. It basically acts as a battery, charge separates positive, negative ions. They put photoelectric wires in it, and they could run a current through it. They could actually turn other things on with that energy. This is very likely how your cells are also working. So your water and your cells are being charged by the sunlight daily. This is me earthing in Big has a black sand beach. So earthing, grounding. I did this also when I was doing the jet lag hacking, going to Bhutan. Again, had no idea what it actually meant. Asprey talked about like he'd go where he was going, he'd take his shoes off and run through the grass. I'm like, all right, we'll go do that. So like 5 minutes good, 10 minutes. I'm looking at my wife, I'm like, 10 minutes is good. And then we put our shoes on, ran around Thailand for the rest of the day. Now I understand how it actually works. You're basically discharging your positive energy into the earth, and you're basically getting like static electricity in ways. And then the earth is full of negative ions. Those negative ions are absorbed through your foot. So this is one of the reasons probably why your hands and your feet sweat. It's so you can make a better connection to the earth, and so that when you're connected, you receive these negative ions, which are electrons. So you can't necessarily completely eat these electrons, but if you're out there, so you might notice that like if you go on a beach vacation, yes, it's great. You're less stressed. You're not at work, whatever. But if you're soaking up sun, charging your water batteries, not wearing shoes in this sand, you're soaking up a lot of electrons. You're not nearly as hungry when you're on a beach vacation for the most part. If you haven't noticed that, next time you go to a beach vacation, just see how much you actually want to eat. My kind of 4 top tips, I think I talked about some of this, but eat seasonal for your location. So if the sun is growing food, you want to eat what's growing at that time of year, ideally. Your body doesn't want a mismatch of what's going into the GI system and what's hitting the skin. So a good example is with blueberries. You can get blueberries $3.65 in St. Louis because somebody in Chile is going to ship them up here and you can get them at your local store. If you eat a blueberry this time of year, is it going to hurt you? No. But is it optimal if you live in St. Louis? Not really. It wasn't grown here in St. Louis. So you throw that blueberry in your mouth, that tells your GI system, hey, the sun grew this. The sun must be very powerful right now. Your skin's like, it's dark, it's 4 o'clock. Where did this blueberry come from? That gives a mismatch to your system that potentially can increase inflammation. So I'm not saying don't ever eat blueberries. I saw blueberries in my smoothies and stuff like that right this time of year. But if you're a sick person or you need to go for more optimal stuff, just eat what's growing locally in your environment. And if you're like, nothing's growing, well then that's sort of the answer. People ask me frequently, what about this keto diet? Well, keto can work, but keto is basically tied to your light environment. So, if you're way up at northern latitude, there's not a lot of things that grow ever. So they're eating a whole lot of fat and protein all year long. You're further on the equator, you can grab a banana every day of the year. It's just right outside your door. Your skin is seeing the sun, the banana's there. Your body knows what to do with it. So, the closer you can eat seasonally, the better you tend to do. The DHA component of seafood is extremely important. It's a little bit technical, but it's ways that, as light enters your system, that DHA basically allows that energy to be transmitted through your cells. So the more DHA you have, it's like a better insulation for transmitting the energy from your environment. You deplete DHA somewhat by blue light, so if you sit in front of a computer 8 hours a day like myself, you're going to have more issues with depleting your DHA. And DHA is needed for brain health, so typically recommend people eat seafood a few times a week. What kind? Almost anyone that could eat that isn't fried, because if you fry it, you destroy the proteins and the fats, and your body sees this stuff as foreign. But as long as it's not a square piece of fish from a place with arches, you're probably going to be okay. But the fattier it is, the more DHA and EPA it has. And I get a question commonly, can you supplement with it? You can, but again, is it optimal? Does your cells actually uptake it once it's been taken out of a fish, put through some kind of blender, back into a capsule, back into your system? Possibly, but that's not the way Mother Nature intended it to be. Time restriction, this is something I routinely talk about with my patients, and it's cheap, easy, and very efficient for many things. So it is not starving yourself. It is not a diet. It's not necessarily skipping meals. It's just more compacting the time of day that you're actually putting fuel into the system. So I already talked about that the sun is one of the setters of your circadian rhythm. The other one is the timing that nutrients or food come into it. Very good book called The Circadian Code by Dr. Panda like the animal, researcher out in California. Wrote a very good book that kind of explains all the science behind why time-restricted eating has all the benefits that it does. And what time-restricted eating actually is just, Dr. Cruz basically says, simplifies this as just, eat when the sun's up, stop when it's down. Well, that works for most people, but if you really want the tighter data, it's, water 24 hours a day is fine, but anything that goes into your system that isn't water likely turns on these clock genes in your liver and in your gut, so that starts the cycle for the day. If you want to go for optimal, finish 12 hours after that period. So if you're drinking even black coffee at 6 a.m., be done by 6 p.m. And try to have 3 to 4 hours where nothing's going into your system before you go to sleep. Because the liver and gut need that 3 to 4 hours before they shut off this clock gene. Because if they're like Home Depot waiting for more deliveries to come in, they don't flip that switch off. You don't necessarily fat burn as well when that happens. So people are having real issues losing weight. One easy way is just stop eating early. I ate dinner tonight early, and I rarely eat this early, but I ate dinner like 4:45 tonight. I'm usually done by 6 every night, but the further you can push it back from your bedtime, a couple things happen. You're going to fat burn better that night. You're going to have better deep sleep. So some people will just do this time-restricted eating. They're not trying to lose weight, but they'll have better sleep quality by doing this. And then people who have issues with blood sugar regulation, it's going to help with that. You're twice as insulin sensitive in the morning time than you are in the evening time. So it's not free reign to eat all the candy you want in the morning time, but if you're going to eat something that's kind of carb heavy, probably want to have it more for your breakfast meal than for your dinner meal, because your body's going to process it a different way. And lastly, I won't go too much into the water, but cleaner sources of water are going to be glacial water or spring water. It's a little bit complicated why you'd want to go this way, but essentially, the water you put into your system, you want to try to grow a really big battery in that system. And drinking just regular tap water affects how big of a battery you can build. Stress, everybody has stress. It's kind of your ubiquitous in your environment, but it's how you respond to it determines what happens to your vascular system. So, you have a parasympathetic system and a parasympathetic system that are supposed to be, they're not always in balance per se, but your sympathetic is your fight or flight response. So that bear is chasing you, you got to raise cortisol because your blood needs to be sticky in case you get injured. Your adrenaline goes up because you need to get your heart rate up so you can run away from the bear or whatever it is. But once the stressor is over, you want it to come back down, and you want your parasympathetic tone to be up. That's your rest and relaxation system of your autonomic nervous system. So the things that happen with stress, and we're talking about the cortisol, but obviously your blood pressure is going to go up because you're trying to perfuse your brain so you can think better, perfuse your muscles so you can run. Increases blood sugar, so you're fueling the muscles, and then your platelets are stickier so you don't bleed to death if you get injured. But your body doesn't know the difference between the bear is chasing you and somebody cuts you off in traffic. Your body responds the exact same way. So, if you're somebody who's frequently, easily stressed, you have to find what works for you to kind of pull that system back in balance. So, yoga is outstanding, meditation, box breathing, where you're kind of holding your breath for certain periods of time. All these things can work. Meditation is extremely useful. I tend to think everybody should give it a shot, at least in their life. It is challenging at the beginning. I've probably been doing it almost every day for 3 years. And yeah, at the beginning you have no idea if you're doing it right. That's the hardest thing. Is like, you think your mind's supposed to be a complete blank slate. That's not actually true. It's just that your mind's going to wander, but how fast can you pull it back down to the center line? And without that feedback, it's sometimes hard to know, are you getting the benefit? There's something that I routinely recommend to my patients called HeartMath. It's a device that plugs into your phone. There are some clinics that also run these devices, but this device clips to your ear usually. It measures the heart rate in your ear, and it has an app where you're basically shown a screen where you're breathing with this little metronome. And as you're doing that, you're getting instant feedback, biofeedback, if you're, quote, doing it right. It'll change colors if you're doing it right. If it's the right colors, your parasympathetic tone has increased. And then, it's called cardiac coherence. Basically, your heart and brain are talking together better. This is sort of what it looks like. Bottom is your actual heart rate. The top is the heart rate variability. So this too will measure your heart rate variability. High coherence, high green is good. Down in the red is more stress. Happy, nice coherent. Stress, very irregular. And that's all the slides I have. My website is Apollo Cardiology. If you're on Instagram, I'm Dr. Twyman. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Twyman. I did recently launch a practice in Clayton called Apollo Cardiology. It's myself and one assistant. I'm totally focused on heart disease prevention, so I really look at the root causes of why somebody would have a heart attack in the first place. So I do it through this method. I look at their vascular system with a carotid scan, CIMT, and calcium scan if they need one, and then do a very comprehensive blood work panel to figure out what's going on with it. And then we talk about what they need to do from a lifestyle standpoint to really reduce their risk of ending up in the hospital or meeting one of my colleagues. So I am open to new patients anytime. I also do telemedicine for those that don't live in downtown Clayton or want to travel to Florida and still be in touch with me. And I'm thankful for all your attention and open it up to questions now.
You're saying that the calcium test is very important.
It's important for most people. The one caveat is if you already